So this week we're back and we're looking at Munchkin, and as you can see, it's a big one. This one, it's similar to the core set in that there's 8 factions that are represented, and as you may be aware, I don't actually have Munchkin, so I've had to do a fair bit of kind of swatting up on this one and reading all the cards and making sure that I know, some of the combinations and what the factions try and do, just so I can, contribute here. But I'll be mainly sort of leaning on Lee and Luke for this one because they both got Munchkin. So they're sort of the resident experts on Munchkin, and they love the Munchkin in the game itself anyway as well. So that's kind of another thing. But yeah, so I'll be contributing. I know what they do, but as I say, straight at the outset, I haven't played. Well, I can think I played like a couple of games of Munchkin, and that was with you guys, and that was about it.
You need to buy them though. They're a very, very good set. The value for money, even if you disregard the ones that play Monsters and Treasures, there's some very strong factions in here that can stand alone and play well. And I think you need to get them. Okay, yeah, you're not going to play Monsters and Treasures every time, but halflings are fantastic paired with other things. There's a lot of cards that don't have the Monsters and Treasures mechanic, and to get
Clerics.
8 sets for
Clerics is such a good pair. But no, sorry, Luke, go on.
Yeah, and to get 8 sets for 30 quid or whatever it is just fantastic. So maybe not advice to you, Mark, because I know you're against it, but anyone watching here, if you're on the fence about this, I would recommend both Smash Up Munchkin and the actual Munchkin game itself. It's not expensive and we have a lot of fun. It very fits to our dynamic of trying to shaft each other over in the 11th hour. So both games are really good. I'd recommend both.
Can you read the text on Helping Hands? It looks really blurry for me.
It's a bit blurry, but I can read.
Yeah, when I did the pictures, they looked pretty good, but I don't know why it's coming out really blurry now.
It's okay. It's a bit blurry.
I'm not sure why that is, and we can say what they do. So first pairing, then we've got Helping Hands for the elves and Dwarfkin for the dwarves. And in case you can't read it, Helping Hands is a special and it plays before a base scores. If you've got a minion there, choose another player. That player gets +2 power. Your minion gets -2 power. If that player is the winner, you get one of that player's VP. So who wants to kick us off on this one?
I don't mind. I think every single faction within this thematically is very good. Elves in the Munchkin game are sort of, you're constantly trying to help people to gain a small advantage yourself, so it does it very much fit within that. I think Dwarf Queen's good. It allows you to recycle treasure cards, and that's what the dwarves want to do. It's another king minion that is the engine of the faction, and it does that well. In you literally conserving a card every time. If that was a minion, it'd be first mate, pretty much that effect. But I think Helping Hand's better because it's a 2 VP swing. You're taking off one and getting on your own, and it might be the case that you never had a chance to even win that base, and you're just taking one off them and gaining it to you. So anytime you can do a 2 BP swing, I think that is better.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Dwarf King is very good from what I can see, because basically Gold Digger is a talent to just get a treasure back from the treasure discard pile. So Dwarf King feels like a bit of an irrelevant duplication, really, of a weaker minion in their faction.
It almost counters its own self in a way. It sort of counters itself because you want it to go to the discard pile.
Yeah, and it's only the treasures that are played on your minions. And I know that the treasure deck is sort of half treasures that you can play on minions and half treasures that you don't play on minions. So it has like a limited field, and then it seems like a worse version of the Gold Digger to me. So it's definitely not going to be Dwarf King. But then I don't think Helping Hands is all that great either. I think one of the games that I have actually played was with elves, and I really loved just playing the trade card where you can give a card to them and take a card from you. And I just played that over and over again. But I found that they were just a dreadful faction, like a really, really poor faction. And I get what they're going for, help other players to help yourself. But I just found that to be, in a game like Smash Up, where one faction might have a slight advantage over another, it's only ever a slight advantage. So even a little bit of help can just make it so that it's very difficult for you to win. So I just found them to be a garbage faction, but I would give it to Helping Hands just because it's that lovable gain of EP on the card that we know and love. But I actually think Helping Hands is a worse version of another card we've actually got in this competition. So Helping Hands for me, but I don't think it's that great either. It's just better than a bad card.
I'll tell you what I like about this is that straight away it's the first matchup and it allows us to kind of put a bit of a value on treasure, because one of the big conversations I think we're going to end up having at some point this evening is about how valuable treasure and how valuable monsters are to this particular set. And it's tough because, again, we're trying to judge a card to go into the Champion of Champions tournament that needs to hold its own against those other cards. And I think in the same way that when we talked about Big in Japan and we kind of said that Kaiju were always in play, I feel like we almost have to make the assumption that treasures and monsters are always in play with this, because on the face value of it, Dwarf King is completely useless if we were not considering treasures and monsters, because at the end of the day, you wouldn't be playing with treasures and monsters, which is something that you can do if you are playing a Munchkin set, or if you're playing some of the factions within the Munchkin set. So I like the fact that this is a pairing that we've got up nice and early, because we can kind of say to each other, actually, treasures are really valuable, monsters are really valuable, and they're a massive dynamic within the Munchkin factions themselves. Helping Hand's the better card out of these two, definitely. I value it probably a bit more than Mark does by the sounds of things, but probably not as much as Luke does. It seems really interesting because I think the elves really, well, they remind me an awful lot of ignobles. I don't want to play them. I'm not interested in playing them whatsoever. And I find them a little bit too, again, convoluted in terms of they can pull off some fantastic things. I've seen Luke do some really good things with the elves as a faction, but I've never been able to properly get my head around how to use them effectively. So for that reason, I've just never really bothered with them. I've never been that excited to sort of play them. But in terms of the debate between treasures and stuff, I think Dwarf King's actually quite a powerful card because some of the treasure cards are massive. So you want to make sure you're recycling and play them. And like Luke said, it is a bit of the engine for the dwarfs because they rely heavily on being able to cycle a lot of treasures. So in terms of in its faction, it's a little bit Monarch-esque in terms of being the driver and the quality behind card draw and faction and recycle and what you want out on the board. But Helping Hand's the better card.
There you have it, people. If you've been waiting to hear it, Monarch came up in the very first pairing.
Yes.
For those keeping track of the Monarch debate in every single video, it was the very first pairing this time around.
You've got to talk about the Monarch effect.
I think you made a really good point there because it's something I hadn't. I suppose, yeah, but Dwarf King is only as good as the treasure deck. Really, that's kind of the point of and the dwarves and thieves and others as well. But when I was looking through the treasure deck, I was pretty underwhelmed. There were a few good cards. There was ones where it was like it loses 2 power and it loses its ability. There's one that said gain a VP. There was one of them that was you can gain the talent of another minion in play. But a lot of them were just kind of really below average. They're cards that if they were in a faction, you'd think they were pretty weak cards. They're not quite as good as a full card in a faction, but they're all right. They're kind of somewhere underneath that power level. A lot of them were. There were some very good ones as well, but I was just kind of a bit underwhelmed by the whole treasure deck, really. Maybe like a quarter were really good, and then the rest were kind of, well, it's all right for a free card, I suppose, but it's not.
I think they've been careful not to make them too strong because you add them into your 40 cards. So if you had some unbreakable ones there or really, really special ones, it's a bit more luck of the draw. If you're picking first, great, but I suppose they don't want to have a real standout weapon.
Yeah, they've gone with quantity rather than necessarily quality. I suppose if you give you enough average stuff, then that gives you a good enough advantage. Whereas if they made them all really good, then if you had got too many of them, you'd have too much of an advantage. So I suppose it's similar to that kind of position,
there's like the thieves that use them in a different way. So in that sense, it's just trying to get as many as you can.
Yeah.
And then cash them in for various things. So it's nice to have the additionals, but it's not always about that. It just gives you more choice, I'd say, is the way. If you're playing a faction that doesn't have any add +2 power, it's just nice to have that mechanic added into your deck.
what I like about it as an idea, sorry, Mark, I know we're about ready to start the next set, but what I like about treasures is it doesn't slow the game down, it adds something to it.
Yeah.
And unlike a lot of the other gimmicks that they added in, things like Madness, for example, this is a gimmick that I think really works because it adds a bit more fun into the game rather than making it a bit more difficult to win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
you
agree.
made another good point in that the other gimmick that they've added in the monsters in this expansion slow the game down. That's the whole purpose of them, isn't it? It's to increase the breakpoint of bases to try and slow the game down. So it's interesting they brought in treasures which are speeding things up and monsters which slow things down. So
It's a
I
balance.
suppose
It's all a
it's
balance.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the incentive is to kill the monsters, and that's where Cleave comes into it. I'll just segue nicely into the things that are on the screen. That's where things like Cleave come into it, because you're incentivized for killing the monsters in two ways, really. One, you reduce the breakpoint of the base, but two, you're going to gain something that's potentially useful and will allow you to be able to break that base faster into it. I like Cleave in this pairing because again, it reminds me an awful lot of playing the actual Munchkin game, which we've got quite a lot of fond memories for, and Cleave is part of that game as well. I like the ability to be able to play those treasures that you're going to get from it, but to me, it's a bit too random, and a Rude Awakening, I think, is what works exceptionally well with the halflings in this instance, because you are a swarm faction, and a real unique kind of swarm faction in terms of how you play the cards down, being able to chain play a great deal of cards in terms of how much power you've got, the number of power and that sort of thing, and the fact that you can swarm it all onto one. I think I've seen Luke play a Rude Awakening to win a game once, and it is horrendously effective if you can pull it all off in one big go. Because the idea is that in your hand you'll have lots of minions. To me, Rude Awakening probably fits my playstyle a bit better than Cleave, so I'm probably going to give my vote to Rude Awakening on this. But again, I like the idea of Cleave because it plays into the idea of wanting to use your cards to destroy monsters to, again, advance the game and to play a little bit of random and a bit of fun. And at the end of the day, that's what it's supposed to be, isn't it? So Rude Awakening for me.
Yeah, I've played halflings a good amount of times because they're a different version of swarm factions. So there's only so many times you can play robot zombies, for that kind of device. And halflings give you it in a different way. They have some elements of, okay, if you've got no minions on here, or if you've already got a minion on here but you're losing, it just adds something different. And Rude Awakening, I've won several games by, okay, bang, 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 bang. There's the end of the game. See you later. And that's this card. It's your game winner. It's your final play. Okay, yeah, you could use it mid-game, but what you don't want to do is decimate your hand of minions in halflings because they don't have very much draw unless you've got Lunch Run out. I think you've got 2 copies of Lunch Run. That's about the only real draw you can get out of them. And if you mess that up, it can feel very slow. If it's not with another faction that has some draw, you can very much be play a minion or just play a single action and pass. So you need to use it with those lunch runs. But Rude Awakening is okay. I've saved a handful of minions up. I'm going to break this base on my own. There's nothing you can do about it, and I'm winning the game. And I've done that play, and it's so strong. It's so strong. This is one of the best cards in the game for me, to the point that I'm not even going to talk about Cleave. Because it's pointless, but Rude Awakening is one of my favourite cards.
Would you say that Rude Awakening is Body Shop 2.0?
I'd say they're very different. It has a similar affection in my heart as Rude Awakening, because I've seen its power. And
there you go, Mark. Can't go any further.
I've seen its power, and it's a nice kind of power. If you could use all their abilities, it would be the best card in the game.
It'd be broken, though, wouldn't it? It'd be
so broken.
Exactly. So they've nuked it to a point. They've nerfed it to a point, but it's still fantastic. You have, in theory, well, up to a point, uncapped power.
Unlimited power.
Yeah, I did do the maths. If you played 9 minions all at once and etc., but it's so good for adding power to a base. And you want to play with a faction that's got a lot of minions, so you can do that. But you just sit waiting for your moment at the end of the game with 3 or 4 minions in your hand, knowing that you're going to break the base and win the game.
Yeah.
Even if you did it on your own, sometimes that's it. The last few turns of the game, you're just watching for which one you can get 5 points from.
Do you want to save it for the next round, Luke? Because you don't need to convince either of us on Rude Awakening here. It's an easy win for Rude Awakening. I think just
the final.
Next round.
For the final.
Next round. I think for me,
it's going to smash Helping Hand as well. Let's be honest.
You mentioned it there again, Lee, in terms of the treasure deck, because they're all different cards. So getting the treasure that you want is going to be entirely like up to chance. It's very random. So you can't really rely on. It's more just an added bonus rather than relying on getting hitting a certain treasure. I think that's just where. I think that's kind of where the weakness. It's fun of the game, but I think in terms of
part of the fun I get out of the game is when other people are trying to play treasure deck and they don't get what they want, and it's more fun to watch the misery on their face as they try to find the one treasure that they really need, and you've got it in your hand, for example. That's part of the fun of it as well. That's part of the fun of the actual Munchkin game as well, because you have no idea what anybody else has got in their hand. So
one of the dynamics they haven't quite managed to capture in Smash Up Munchkin is that dynamic of, okay, come help me and I'll give you 2 treasures, and the negotiation of it. I want the first treasure. I want this treasure and that treasure. I'll do it for 1 less, which is the charm of Munchkin, really. But that's something that they haven't managed to capture and smash up with the treasure deck. It's just a nice additional bonus if you can get it.
I think they maybe tried to do that with the way that the treasure's done now, isn't it? In the way like you draft it almost, one person picks and the next person. I think they tried to maybe capture that in the. But I suppose it's hard to translate a game across entirely, isn't it, into a different format.
Is this even a discussion, by the way? This one, I don't even
know.
No,
this is
these cards up.
This is clever distraction through and through. But Happy Zapper was great, though, isn't it? Happy Zapper was a very. I thought that was a very solid card.
Great power 3. It's a great power 3 minion.
Yeah.
Easily one of the best power 3 minions in the game.
And you can potentially do that talent twice, can't you? For buff up to 5, and then if that breaks the base, you can buff up to 7 during the base breaking phase as well. So a power 3 to become a 7 is incredible.
And I have played Wizard's Ghosts and not Wizard's Ghosts. Sorry, what they called them? Is it Mages?
Mages. Yeah.
I've played Mages Ghosts, and the whole buffing yourself up by discarding cards to discard cards to improve the power of ghosts is a wonderful little combo of a faction. I also played it with, what else did I play it with? Mages, and I can't remember which faction it was. It had incredible card draw, and that was a really powerful combination as well. It's not always the most common thing you would pair with something like a ghost faction, but where you want to discard cards, you want as many cards in your hand as possible, so you can discard as many cards as possible as often as you can. You cycle through your deck ridiculously. It was a great little. It was a really fun game to play. Not like Elves, where you were constantly trying to work out how you could give something away to be able to potentially gain something. With cards like Happy Zapper, you were just throwing cards away to try and buff things up, and that was great fun.
I'm going to stick up for Elves at some point, but I'll probably save it till Fae Fighter gets on the board, because he epitomizes it.
Should we?
At some point, I'll stick up for Elves a little bit.
Are we going to save the arguments for clever distraction to the final?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
To the final.
Yeah.
Semi-final.
The final.
Well, it's just a better version of Helping Hand, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but Helping Hand's not going to make it past.
Well, that's true. But then Rude Awakening isn't going to make. Ooh, maybe it will. Ooh. Spoilers. Hashtag spoilers.
So rude.
There are quite a lot of cards in this expansion that do say gain a VP, which is nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the final,
in keeping with the actual Munchkin game, though, isn't it? That's the same sort of thing, isn't it? You gain
extra levels.
So in the final one on this side, then we've got Angry Pillagers and Been and Gone. So in terms of, when I was looking at these, it's a close one, this one, but for me, it's probably Angry Pillagers, because the limitation on actually gaining the VP is quite small. Having 3 more power if you're the winner is quite realistic. Whereas Been and Gone, I felt probably Cardinal should have come through, because I felt this was too similar to Deep Fryer, and that we were having Deep Fryer and Been and Gone in the same tournament. I felt was maybe just a bit of duplication. So I think this Been and Gone is probably a worse Deep Fryer. So the effect is strong, but then we've sort of got a very similar effect anyway on the other side of the draw. So for me, it's Angry Pillagers, just because it's quite seemingly a feasible way of gaining an extra VP, especially on the runner-up, and in a 2-player game, getting effectively a 2 VP swing, 1 to you, and then they're not getting 1, is pretty big. So as everyone knows, I'm a big fan of cards that let you gain free VP. So for me, it's Angry Pillagers.
Yeah, the slight drawback to Been and Gone is that you have to know. So something like First Mate, when the base scores, which is the epitome of recursion, keeping the minions around when the base scores, that's when you choose what base it goes to. But this, you have to put it on the base that you want the card to go to when it scores. Okay, it does give you the option of when any base scores, you can keep any minion whenever. You can pick the minion rather than pick the base. But you have to sort of preemptively know which base you want to put it on. So there's potentially a chance that somebody could break that base before you use it. The base that Been and Gone's on rather than another base. I do like it, but you have to think about it maybe a few moves ahead. I think Angry Pillagers is better there.
I suppose Been and Gone, if you can counter Been and Gone quite easily with a card that just will destroy an action that's played on a base, or they could just break the base, as you say. They could just break the base that Been and Gone's on if they can see that you've got a big threat and they don't want to maybe keep that around. They'll go through this base as well. So.
And to me, that's why I prefer
Angry
Pillagers. Yeah, that's why I prefer Angry Pillagers. The fact that it's a special, so you're going to get the extra VP when you play it anyway. Or at least you've got a better chance of being able to get the extra VP before someone else tries to put extra things down to be able to stop you. But yeah, and the same. I think when I was looking through all of the cards again, and I was trying to refresh my memory of stuff, and I remember looking through all of the cleric cards and thinking, my God, I can't wait till we get together. I'm definitely going to combo a few things with those clerics, because they're just a faction that I was really excited to play. And again, that's what I look for. And when I say a faction's rubbish, it's obviously not rubbish. They're all equally valuable, apart from superheroes, but they're all equally valuable in terms of their own pros and cons, and they play into different people's play styles. But in terms of what gets me excited about faction, lots of cards that do lots of different things, and I know the clerics just seem to have a massive range of stuff. But I know we've said this a few times, but to me the clerics are a good example of a faction that has 1 or 2 good individual cards, but the sum of their parts is much bigger than the individuals. So you never really get a massive standout card. You get lots of cards that work really well together, and you get a really good faction as a result of it. So that's, to me, what the clerics kind of represent. And that's a faction that I like to play, because I like to be able to play lots of different things. But for me, the special on Angry Pillagers is what makes it the better card.
We all agreed?
Yeah.
I think we're saving it for what looks like the biggest first round pairing we've got on the other side over there. We've got Eternal Hero, by the looks of it, up against Sword Lord. So let's just get them out onto the side. And I know this is the sort of card, Luke, that's right up in your wheelhouse, Eternal Hero.
Absolutely.
This is a tough one. It's a really tough one. Who wants to kick it off? Luke, do you want to say why it should be Eternal Hero?
Yeah. I mean, do I need to say it? Are you guys not entirely okay? Sword Lord adds quite a bit of power. I will give him that. But imagine playing Eternal Hero on Sword Lord. Just play him over and over again.
Okay,
you get the action back. You get the minion and the action back into your hand every time. Every time.
Recursion.
Every time. That's okay. You have
Was
to.
it you wanted on your gravestone, Luke?
Yeah.
It was pretty much Eternal Hero, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, the only downside, and it's a minimal one, is you have to use your minion in your action play to get that card back out rather than it staying on the board. But think of how strong some of the king minions are that we've put through in this tournament. Being able to have that out
Invader
every time.
Invader.
Well, he sort of wants to be in and out, doesn't he? But like, if you think of your Great Worm or whoever we're having them out every single time, without the only way they can remove it is destroying it, which is very difficult, or potentially bounce it back to your hand. But they can't score the base anymore to get rid of it. So it's so strong, so strong.
Yeah, even just
Sword
last
Lord
week
can add whatever power he wants to it, but the fact is that being able to play something like Sword Lord over and over again is better than Sword Lord in a sort of weird way. The option to have him out every time is better than what you can have out.
Yeah, even last week when Valkyrie was the winner, and playing Valkyrie over and over again is a pretty insane combination.
Ridiculous.
And any king minion that's got a really powerful on-play effect, you can just keep on cycling with Eternal Hero. I remember I was reading up on some of these cards, as I say, and someone said you put Eternal Hero onto Doppelganger, and then when Doppelganger goes to the discard pile, you play a minion from your deck for free, and then you get a Doppelganger and Eternal Hero back, and you keep on doing that. You keep on getting a free extra minion play, which I thought was really good.
I wonder what I'm going to play the next time we all get together.
That is mega.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it's a shame. It's a shame that these two have come up against each other in the first round, because I think Sword Lord could beat quite a few of the other first round pairings.
Yeah,
probably.
I agree.
Ultimately, I mean, as with all of these things, if it doesn't win, then it loses, doesn't it? I suppose so. It would have to beat everything if it was going to. In theory, it could beat everything to win it. So if it can't beat Eternal Hero now, it's not going to beat Eternal Hero later on down the line. So although it's a shame it goes out in the first round, that effect is very strong. Big power 5 minion, everything else +1 power. That's great. Very, very solid.
I'm not as excited about it. Are you excited about it?
It's not an exciting
card
effect, but it's a very strong effect.
The Orcs don't excite me. The Orcs don't excite me at all. Although I do like the fact that they've got 3 power 5 minions. That's quite cool.
Yeah. So are you in agreement, Lee, as well with Eternal Hero?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Very, very strong card.
So we've got playing Shapeshifters Warriors next time we play.
Yeah, I have to stop that from happening.
So we've got 9 minutes. Do we want to keep on going and try and get to the end of this?
Yeah.
Row?
Yeah, let's go. We can do it. We can get to the end of the row.
We can at least do a couple of more, probably.
Yeah. So we've got the number 2 seed for Halflings against Charm. Who are we going for here? Who do you fancy?
Marshall.
I like Charm as well. Charm because it shafts somebody else, which plays right into my wheelhouse.
There were quite a few strong monsters, so being able to take a power 5, even more than power 5 monster, could be really very, very strong. But the ongoing value of Shy Marshall is certainly that's really great. It's an uncapped power as well. It's any extra minion. It doesn't have to be like a minion of power 2 or less or anything. It's just a free minion play basically.
My only concern with Charm is how far would it go in real competition, because again we're assuming that there's monsters on the board in play, and that's not always going to be the case necessarily.
For me,
true, yeah.
Stuff that only lasts until the end of the turn is limited to how good it can be, because it only really, it's not quite true, but it mainly matters when you're breaking the base, because at the end of the turn it goes back to normal. So unless you're gaining something else within that turn, it only really matters on base breaking. Whereas Shy Marshall, you want to strand him somewhere and keep using that power, and the other minions within Halflings have on-play abilities that
you're right. You're right.
and you use him to chain. I think he's the king minion in Halflings. From memory. I don't think there's a power 5, but I think any king minion that they make a power 4 just speaks to the strength of the faction. If you think of Wizards and Archmage, they made him power 4 to try and keep it a bit capped, keep it not from being way better than the other factions, just taking the edge off. And I think they've done the same thing with Shire Marshal. Any other minion and chaining it with the others is strong.
I think you just mentioned it there again, Lee, in terms of if you're playing a Munchkin with like regular factions, some bases might not even have monsters on them.
Yeah.
So Charm might be very rich. I know mages do have ways of playing monsters onto bases, but then it's just RNG, isn't it? Because you don't know which monsters you're going to get onto which base. So it's all a bit random, I suppose, unless you're playing with just specifically Munchkin factions, and then you're going to have loads of monsters on board. But in a regular game, yeah, it might be quite restricted. Just a quick question for you two then. I mean, when I saw the Halfling cards, I put Lunch Run in as my kind of big number one pick, I think. Why do you think that Shire Marshal is better than Lunch Run?
This isn't, for me, that the judgment wasn't how good the card is within the faction. It was how good the card is. And then there's different criteria of how good it is within the faction and how good it is standalone and the other things. Lunch Run is your way to draw cards within Halflings. It needs it. If you can't get 3, 4, 5 card draw from Lunch Run, your 2 copies of Lunch Run, you really struggle unless the faction that you paired it with can draw as well. If you don't see your copies of Lunch Run for a while, you notice. But that doesn't make it better than the Rude Awakening and Shire Marshal in terms of what they offer to the faction. If you assume an ideal scenario where you can draw and you've got enough cards, you'd just be playing Shire Marshal over and over again. It is needed within the faction, but that doesn't necessarily make it better than some of the other cards we've seen. And that effect is in some of the other factions, playing cards or to play on base actions that let you draw cards in different ways. So it just wasn't special. It didn't stand out to me.
Yeah, because in theory, the value you can get on like a double Lunch Run base is every minion's 2 cards basically, and the amount of minions you can play down, you can draw like an insane amount with your deck, can't you? With like a double Lunch Run base.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's a great card. Don't get me wrong. It's a great card. But Halflings are a great faction. They are my favorite faction in this set. They are in my top 5 factions of the whole game. I think they're that good, and it's much more fun than playing robots for the millionth time. It plays differently, but it has some very powerful effects.
It's Swarm with a difference, and it's like a thinking man's Swarm, I find. Halflings, whereas robots are a little bit face roll, aren't they? But it's good fun. But
there's a lot of like if there's no minions on this base, or if they've got more power than you have to sort of time it a bit and do that, but it can very easily get.
This is hard. All right, I want to give this to Deep Fryer, but Fey Fighter is probably a better card than Deep Fryer in this instance. Now, this is a good example of the elves giving away 1 power to be able to power up one thing significantly. And this is, it's like a fast track way of powering up your, it worked particularly well in a 4-player game, like a fast track way of powering up your first mate. Something like that. This is where Fey Fighter really comes into its own. You strand it somewhere miles away, you put something terrible, put something low powered near it, and then every time anybody plays another minion down, you get another +1 power counter. And this is where, on the face of it, this card looks like it looks like it's bad value because you're always giving power away, but the value is that you're powering the same thing up over and over and over again, and this is where you get your body shot combo going.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think in a 2-player game, I can see this being way worse than in a 4-player game.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
Which is a bit odd.
This is where I'm going to stick up for elves here. So the beauty of elves is you get to choose who gets the benefit as well as you. Now there's a tactic to that. I think it's Lord of the Prance lets you draw a card. Okay, yeah, you are helping other people, but Fey Fighter is a great example of that. If you're in a 4-player game, you can gain 3 power. Okay, everyone else has gained. The game has gained 3 power,
6 power,
against
yeah.
you. Yeah, 6 power total. But your one minion has gained 3 power on his own. But it's also optional. You don't have to do it. You can, if there is no good minion to put the other power counter on, if they've stranded something on a base that they're using over and over again, you know, let's say they put their Shy Marshal on another base and they don't want that base to break because they want him out. You can either use it to help bait the brace, or you can put some power on there. It's never going to matter to the game. You get the choice of it. And if the situation isn't right to do it, don't do it. If it's not worth you gaining that extra 1 power counter to give someone else one, then you just don't do it. So the other thing about elves, and it's sneaky, is they don't seem like a threat. And I think you guys have summed it back up. Right? They don't seem like a threat, and that makes them quite dangerous, because all of a sudden your Fae fight in 2 rounds of the board might have 11 power on his own, and they sneak up on you a little bit. The Lord of the Prance, all of a sudden you've got quite a few extra cards, and somebody else, okay, let's say you're playing against Ghosts, you're giving them extra cards they probably don't want. There's ways to take advantage of the benefits they gain, and because they seem a bit ridiculous and it seems like, oh well, you're just giving it to someone else as well. That is the power. They sort of sneak up on you a bit, lull you into a bit of a false sense of security. They're not one of the best in the game, but they are quite good. But there are some situations where you just don't take advantage of it, and it's still a power 5 and more. But he can grow very quickly. Having said all that, I probably do think Deep Fry is better because of the old first mate scenario where you just I love being able to keep minions around when base is scored. But
Right, we got cut off again. So what were you saying, Lee? You were just finishing up on Deep Fryer.
yeah, I think I do prefer Deep Fryer because I'm an addict for the recursion of when your base cards keep the minion out on the field. I just think it adds too much value. I think it's the best mechanic in the game, personally. And any card that has something that generally has an advantage for me. But I do think Fae Fighter is underrated because it feels like not a great card when you're giving away the power, but it can actually build itself to be quite strong. So,
well, that's it. I think Hearthstone does this where you get symmetrical effects, but they're not necessarily symmetrical if you've got a way of, you know, better using the symmetrical effect. And I think Fae Fighter, so if someone's winning on a base, giving them an extra power won't matter as much as you getting the power. So although it's a symmetrical effect, it matters less to them than it does to you. And I think that's, I suppose, the power of something like Fae Fighter. But for me, as Lee said earlier on, you know, they're sort of ignoble in style, where they're trying to do something, you know, a bit clever and a bit cute, but you know, you just prefer the solid, simple, Deep Fryer-esque style of value rather than this kind of very convoluted way of playing it. And I'm sure they're very thematic, but for me, it just didn't float my boat at all. And I've actually played them. One of the few Munchkin factions I have played, and I didn't really like it all that much.
it does get a bit annoying when you just keep passing that action card between each other, swapping out. But it does get a bit annoying doing trade.
I can't remember what I was doing it with, but it was
a laugh for a full hour, really, didn't it? But
yeah,
other than that,
it was one of you guys, I think, had run the hand down. I think maybe you're playing mages or something. You'd run your hand down quite low, and I was just able to like trade block you. So whenever you drew, I was just giving you 2 trades or something and just copied your cards or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but it was quite funny. It was, yeah, it was good to trade, but outside
the problem is once you trade, they just trade back, or they just trade with someone else. You just end up doing it every time.
Yeah.
And trade is quite a good mechanic in, you know, real Munchkin, but it just doesn't have the same effect when you play that card in Smash Up.
Right then, who wants to finish off the first round?
Battle of the Threes here.
Dig under the fence. Fence for me. As we've said a number of times, the treasures are only as good as the ones that you draw. There's a good chance that you've drawn ones that might be useful, but might not be useful. None of the treasures are as useful as a VP, apart from the one that says gain a VP. So fence for me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty damning indictment on the treasure deck, really, in that they're supposed to be good cards, but 2 cards aren't worth as much as a VP. So the best thing you can do with them is just to toss them and gain a VP, basically. I mean, that's
another way to think of that, though, Mark, and it's not really worth too much of a discussion, to be fair. But how many cards would you play for a VP?
What, just regular? If there weren't treasure cards, just how many cards would you discard for a VP? That's an interesting question. Imagine if Ghost had a card like that, for example. What would the count be? I don't think there is a number. I wouldn't say anything less than 5 would be worth.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So maybe that does speak to the value of treasures, because they're only saying discard 2.
So the treasures didn't start in their deck. In fairness, they had to.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you had to draw them in. But okay, let's say it's taking you 2 moves to get them. So there's the equivalent of 2 cards, and you're discarding those 2 treasures, assuming that they're not going to be valuable or less valuable than the VP themselves. So you're saying 4 cards realistically, as a rough
5 plus, probably 5 plus. Yeah. But
so to me, if you said I could discard my hand for a VP, I'd discard my hand for a VP probably.
If that was to win you the game, yeah. They seem like a more kind of balanced, fairer invader, but then I don't really want a more balanced, fairer invader, to be honest. I just want invader.
Because they'll lose to invader in the final.
Well, yeah, he absolutely would, and like the restrictions, I know thieves have some way of getting treasures, but they're not as easy to get treasures as the dwarves are.
Yeah,
so
you need more ways.
Yeah, you need more ways to get treasures. Yeah, so I mean, dwarves and thieves would be a good
treasure.
Yeah, there would be a good pair in these 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's fence for me. But that's maybe just because if we're saying the treasures aren't that great and it's better just to throw them away for VP, then it doesn't really, that doesn't really sing the praises of Gold Digger, to be honest, because you're just accruing sort of very average cards. In the main, there are some obviously very good ones, but yeah, I think fence for me. But I don't think either would get very far in this competition.
Yeah, I'll give it to fence. I don't love it as a card, and I think there's too much to do to get the victory point. It feels like there's not that much to do because you just discard 2 cards to gain a VP, but you have to get the treasures. Have fence in your time when have fence in your card when you get the treasures. Play him down at the right time when you've got two treasures, not 1. And it can just feel like you sit on him for a while to gain his 1 VP, and you don't really use his 3 power until you can use his effect. So it just feels a bit too messy. Having said that, through to the next round, so I'll save that for the next.
Yeah,
save that for the next argument. But
yeah. I know I'm on a similar line of thought to you there, really. I mean, I love cards that say gain a VP, but that's not one of them. So we're into the quarterfinals now.
Yeah.
And we're getting into some of the good stuff.
A big one.
So here we go. Rude Awakening.
I think you know which I'm going to go for. Is anybody picking Helping Hand here?
I'm not.
No.
Not me.
Easy
day, easy victory. I think for me, it's just because Helping Hands is a worse clever distraction, and why put it through when Rude Awakening is clearly the better card. Yeah,
it's
I agree.
Interesting here, and you alluded to it earlier, the amount of VP cards, but the VP cards are actually coming through now. You've got Fence, Clever Distraction, Angry Pillagers, and Helping Hand. And they're starting to. We're going to have some interesting battles here when we decide which is worth more, a really strong ability or gaining victory points.
I think for me, the Helping Hands is not even guaranteed, because even if you give them 2 power and they look like they might be the winner, someone could Shinobi it and they might overtake to first place, and that just completely ruins Helping Hands for you. It comes down to the order in which you play specials, so it's not even guaranteed. So it's not for me, that one. So Reawakening's gone as far as it can potentially.
I love the
Or
art on Rude
in the
Awakening.
next round.
Sorry, I'll save that for the fan.
Here we go. The other quarterfinal on the other side, on this side. So 2 VP gaining cards here. Clever Attraction and Angry Pillagers. So is there anyone who's going to say that Angry Pillagers is the better card?
They don't quite both have equal. So if you split them into two parts, how easy it is to gain, how easy it is to fulfill, and then what you gain out of it. So Angry Pillagers is gain 1 VP. Clever Distraction isn't quite gain 1 VP. It's gain 1 VP and somebody else loses 1 VP. So I think that's better.
I also think it's easier to get the VP. With Angry Pillagers, you're already getting victory points. It's just an extra 1 on top, which, all right, it's nice, but it's nowhere near as valuable as taking 1 off somebody for having 3 power, a minion on a base.
Yeah.
And
then,
as well...
Yeah, it's infinitely easier to fulfill.
Infinitely easier to fulfill.
And in the same vein as Helping Hands, it's not necessarily guaranteed. Because what happens if someone moves a load of your minions off the base? You know, you play Angry Pillagers and then they play some movement special, and you know you're no longer 3 VP ahead. So it's not even a guarantee that you'll get the Angry Pillagers VP.
It will put a target on your back when you play a card. You know, if you play a card like this, people will want to stop you doing that. So they'll pull out some of their specials when they might not necessarily have done so before to stop you gaining that extra VP. Whereas Clever Distraction, it's almost too late because you're doing it from the position of losing.
Yeah, and it's exactly, and it's way easier to have a minion on a base than it is to be winning a base. So Clever Distraction will come off pretty much, every time. And it's interesting, the wording. Clever Distractions obviously play after the base scores, so the base scoring is kind of already resolved. So you'd already know whether you wouldn't play Clever Distraction unless you knew it was going to come off, and that's what you can do because of that's the way the wording allows it. Whereas Angry Pillagers is played when it scores rather than after it scores. So for me, it's definitely Clever Distraction.
Easily.
Yeah. So it looks like a clean route through to the final now for Clever Distraction.
Don't start this.
Okay. So on the other side.
Shop 2.0.
For the record, I didn't call it Body Shop 2.0.
I thought you did in the messages.
I said there was a card in this. When we were voting for our cards, there is a card in here that I would have had a similar reaction to if it didn't make it into at least our top 2s. If it didn't make it into the tournament, yes, Rude Awakening was the card. If it didn't make it in, I would have had a similar tantrum as I did when Body Shop didn't make it into the top 8.
Okay, so the other side now, and this is another tough one. I think for me
I don't think it is. I don't think.
Yeah, for me it's fairly straightforward, but I mean they are both good cards fundamentally.
Yeah, I agree.
But for me, there's one cards. That's Eternal Hero is just far and away
leaps and bounds better.
Yeah. Luke, are you sort of in agreement there, or?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What I'm a big fan of so far here is that we've all kind of agreed on a number of different things, but the big thing for me that I think does speak volumes to kind of the weakness of monsters and the weakness of treasures is that everything that's gone through so far or that's going through so far is directly playable in any faction. And it's always been one of the things that I've been trying to look for as we've been doing this series is a card that is as unmonarch-like as possible, as in it relies on its own strength rather than the strength of the other things that it gets to do. And I mean, both of these cards are really good because both of these cards do that. All of the cards that we've talked about so far do that. But to me, Eternal Hero is one of the best actions that we've seen. The ability to be able to recycle not just the minion, but the action as well, over and over again, I think it's going to be a tough one to beat.
Oh, I mean, we've seen nothing like this in the main game. And when I was looking through the Munchkin stuff, I was like, wow, this is
overpowered.
Unbelievable. So good. Yeah, it's so good. I mean,
but the problem is...
Sorry, go on, Luke.
The problem is warriors play with monsters. They want to play with monsters. So you can't really just pepper it into whatever game you're playing without having to play monsters with everybody.
No, and I
That's the
get
problem.
that. I get that in the general discussion of things. If you're playing this card, you're playing with the Warriors. I get that. But in terms of putting this card through to like a faction of faction,
It's
tournament of
fantastic.
card
Yeah,
of cards,
yeah.
it's independent of all of the monsters and the treasures and all the other stuff that goes
And
along with it.
that's probably
what I
it.
mean
It's probably that it's in the wrong faction, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Realistically,
The reason I've never seen this card before is because it's sort of in the wrong faction, even in Munchkin, maybe, that compared to other things.
It's a shame that it isn't going to be played as much as other cards because this faction probably won't get played as much as others. But can we just take a minute to appreciate Shire Marshall has a flag with a giant sausage on it, and a sausage in his hand. And I've got a lot of time for that. Despite having no mouth to eat it with, it very much speaks to what I'm about.
Maybe that's not where he's putting his sausage, Luke.
Oh dear. Yeah, I think he's got a little backpack on, maybe.
Yeah,
it's a guitar.
That's a guitar, isn't it? Yeah. Where you put your sausage in your ukulele.
Yeah.
That's a pretty clear-cut final there to me. That's as far as I see it.
This is going to be. It's going to be a very good. It's going to be a very good semi-final.
Please don't do this to me until we're at least in the round.
But I mean,
wait till the round.
This semi-final. I mean, looking at the semi-finals here is better than a few of the finals that we've had.
That's true.
Yeah. Some of the
we've had more cards. We've had more cards statistically. That's
we've got more.
This is as good the semi-final rounds are as good an argument as I can make for you to buy this expansion.
There's some great cards in this expansion. There's some
great cards, some even better factions, and even if you disregard 2 or 3 because they play with monsters or treasures, even if you disregard that, you're still getting 5 or so factions that don't play with them, and that's the same as a bumper expansion.
My argument for this is that when they made this set, they remembered what this was, and that is a game. They remembered that it was supposed to be a fun game. And then they came out with that Brothers Grimm rubbish that we're going to be talking about the next time we do one of these videos. All of that terrible, terrible overthinking ridiculousness of the factions. That's just not fun. This is fun, and it's supposed to be fun, and that's what this game is supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun. And every time we've played Munchkin, we've all of us had a laugh. Like you said with the trade cards, it's a stupid little gimmick within that faction, but it made it fun to do. The other stuff just overthinks it. There's a place for the thinking factions and the geeks and the ghosts and there's all of those things are there. And I guess I was kind of remotely excited to play with the Polynesian Voyagers or whatever, but it's like a small amount compared to any of these factions, or apart from Els, but any of these factions, realistically, because they're just fun. They're fun factions. All the card art says that they're fun. There's no seriousness within any of this, and that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'd chuck in a few of the other mechanics rather than picking on Grimm. I'd chuck in stuff like dueling and madness.
Oh, that as well. All that as well, yeah. Dueling, who cares? Burying cards, it doesn't add anything to me. It doesn't make it more exciting. It just makes it more convoluted. This is exciting.
The thing is, Vikings feel like more of a Munchkin style faction to me. Stealing cards.
Stealing a card. Yeah, you're probably not wrong. Yeah, it's screwing somebody over, but the gimmick's really easy to understand, and it doesn't completely wreck the game, apart from when you break somebody's soul by taking the one card that they really need to be able to maintain their engine. But that's why Valkyrie won.
Okay, final quarterfinal then. So Deep Fryer and Fence. Now, who thinks Fence should be the card that goes through?
I'm torn. I am on the fence on this one. I think Deep Fry is a better card because I prefer recursion than I do the discard idea. But who doesn't like VP? And as we said before, I don't think it's that expensive to discard 2 treasure cards to be able to boost yourself with an extra VP. If it was taking one away from somewhere, do you know what would make this card even better? Because it's thieves, and it would have been better as if that VP that you got was from somebody else. If you got to discard 2 treasure cards and take that victory point off somebody else, Fence would be a really good card. But the fact is that it's just gaining a VP from nowhere else. So I think Deep Fryer is probably better in the long-term run of things.
Luke?
Yeah, Deep Fryer is better for me too.
Yeah, I agree.
I mentioned it briefly, but at the end of the last round on Fence, but the amount of times you sit with him in your hand waiting for that moment where you can gain the treasure cards to then not use them in the way that, you're not gaining the advantage from them. You ask, I know they're not necessarily the best cards in the game, but there are some good ones. And you basically sat there going, I could probably use this, whatever it is, to my advantage, but you have to get rid of them both after working probably quite hard to get them. And it feels like you jump through a lot of hoops to gain that one victory point, and it's not as good as some of the other victory point cards we've got.
Yeah, and it's most comparable to something like Invader, but as we've mentioned several times with Invader and First Mate, you pick aliens for Invader, but I don't know if you would pick Thieves for Fence. Like, I don't know if it's that sort of thing necessarily with Thieves. And I think all the stars have to align, and I think you mentioned it there, you have to draw the treasures first, you have to have some way of drawing, and you have to have Fence in your hand at the right time to use discard the treasures. And I think there's just too much stuff having to happen at the same time for Fence to actually come off consistently, multiple times in a game. It's probably just too difficult for them. So somewhat controversially, should we start with because I think one of these semi-finals is going to be very difficult and one of them is going to be very easy. So should we start with the, in theory, easy one and do Eternal Hero and Deep Fryer?
You want to?
Yeah, I think we let's get the easier side of the draw out of the way with, and then let's move to the more difficult side. I mean, I'm fairly set on which one of these is the better card, I think. I don't know about you guys.
Are we putting Deep Fryer in
We're all saying Deep Fryer.
Deep Fryer, yeah.
Putting him in the bin.
Well, you slap Eternal Hero on a Deep Fryer and you just keep the Deep Fryer over and over again.
Oh, but do you know what? That would be a really good little play, wouldn't it? Do you know, the thing that I really like about Deep Fryer that we've not really mentioned, I was kind of saving it till it got a little bit further on anyway, is that you don't lose the power counters and stuff that you've played on the minion because you're moving it to another base. It's very Explorer-esque movement, which is a much better way of being able to recurge cards, if that's a word. I don't think it is, but it is now. But in terms of recursion, it's not a case of picking it up and putting it down again. I know you don't get the on-play ability again, so it's not as great for something like an Invader, for example, but that's probably not what you'd use this for. You'd use this to be able to move your buffed up King Rex or whatever it is that you've been able to put a lot of power counters on. That's what this card is really, really good at, keeping your best or your most powerful card in play multiple times over. If you've got an ability on a card that's Yokozuna, for example, keeping Yokozuna in play for a card like this, that's where Deep Fryer is really coming into its own, and that's where it's exceptionally powerful. But you've just said it yourself, you put an Eternal Hero on a Deep Fryer, you get both back. I'm sorry, Eternal Hero is a better card.
The nice thing about Deep Fryer is you can use, the king minions that are power 5 that you want to stay on the field. You almost want to strand them a little bit.
Yeah.
You can actually, this is a situation where you can use them to break the brace and still keep them out on the field. But you could just pick them back up with Eternal Hero and
do it again. Anyway.
The difference being if you've buffed that card up, your Eternal Hero, you're going to lose your buffs, which is the only drawback of getting that. But the whole idea of having to be able to replay the card, to be able to get its on play again, or to be able to gain the draw, this is where Eternal Hero Monarch would work really well, where you're able to keep that card in play to keep getting those groupies back over and over again. It's the Eternal Hero that is the hero of the two cards. So the Eternal Hero is what makes it much, much better. But yeah, Deep Fryer is great. And the whole idea of the fact that you keep the power on the card as you slide it to another base, like I say, is very Explorers-esque in terms of how you're moving those power cards around. But like I think you said it, Luke, it basically turns that card into your first mate.
Yeah, and I suppose for Deep Fryer, it is harder to destroy a power 4 minion than it is to destroy an action on a minion, I suppose. So Deep Fryer does have that slight edge going to it, but it's a no-brainer. I mean, Eternal Hero, you slap it on any big minion that has a great on-play ability, and you just keep playing that ability over and over and over again in the game. And that's such great value. You can't really beat that kind of value. So it's an easy semi-final, that one. Deep Fry's done well to get where it did, but
Yeah, it's a good card.
I think it's
I think it is
it's deserved.
Yeah, I think it's the fourth best card in this.
Yeah, I probably would agree with
bracket.
that.
Yeah, I think the other three are, really up there, and Deep Fryer is just a bit below them.
It's interesting. I think it had the easiest section to get through. I think against maybe Sword Lord, it might have been a bit more of a discussion. But no, I agree. I think it's probably the fourth best out of the cards that are there.
Yeah. Here we go then. The more difficult, I would say, side of the draw here.
It's only going to make one person upset, though.
I don't mind which way you guys come down on, because the reality is both of these cards are good cards. I have experienced Rude Awakening winning me a game on at least 3 occasions as my game closer, whether it's stealing a base from someone else or breaking a base entirely. I have experienced it, so I can speak to it from that point of view. It closes the game. If you get it in the start of the game, or you always want it in your hand for the end, but to play it mid-game, you might struggle because you always want to just pile on the base, destroy it, and win. You could play it mid-game, but you don't want to decimate your hand. And with halflings, you do want to use their on-play abilities to chain more minions, so it doesn't really fit within that. Clever Distraction, it won't necessarily win you the game at that time. It's not going to win you the game at the end of the game necessarily. Because in reality, if you think about a base with 4-2-1, they're going to get 3, you're going to get 3, you're both going to tie. You're not jumping anyone necessarily. You would if it was a 3-2-1 base. They'd end up on 2, you'd end up on 3, but I think the limitations of how the bases are scored mean you're probably going to tie, or it's a nice bump, but it probably isn't going to win you the game on its own. It's going to add to your total and take off someone else. It's a strong card, don't get me wrong, but Rude Awakening, being able to play down an absolute ton of power to break a base on your own, or to absolutely make sure you're winning the base, and that no one can get close to you. You can sit there with your minions and just block it out, knowing that no one can come back from it. I think that is so good, so much more powerful. We mentioned it earlier, the Clever Distraction. You are losing when you play that card. You literally play it when you lose a base, whereas Rude Awakening, you're always winning that base. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. There's a very slim chance someone plays a special on you, but you can make it so that even if they try, it's so out of reach because your minion score. And my final point before I'll shut up and let you guys decide is the card art on this of the wolf being woken up by what I assume is sheep in his bed, who were normally what you count to go to sleep, and normally what the wolf will eat is fantastic to me. So I like Clever Distraction. I think Rude Awakening is better. In my experience, it has changed the game more for me than Clever Distraction has.
Do you want to go next, Lee?
No, I want you to go next, please, Mark.
He loves deciding, doesn't he? He loves you to do your argument on Clever Distraction, and then one of us is just going to get a punch in the face.
I think for me, I mean, obviously I'm coming from a point of view of not having played either card, so it's all kind of theory crafting, hypothetical stuff here. But for me, in terms of the impact, Rude Awakening might have a bigger impact, but in terms of sort of ease of play, Clever Distraction is the clear winner in terms of on those criteria. And what I mean by that, I suppose, is that Rude Awakening, obviously, you have to. I think it just on the surface, I think it's a card you probably want to play early and then try and get back into it and play it late as well. Try and get twice, try and do it twice in a game.
Yeah, maybe.
But I think
write that down, Lee.
I think in theory,
put that on my side.
I don't know in terms of, I haven't played it, but I'm in theory, it's unlikely you're going to get anything more than 5 minions, maybe. If everything aligns perfectly, you might get more, but you're going to get a reasonably, 3, 4, 5 minions out of it, maybe. And with the halfling's power, that might not even be enough to break the base solo, but it might be enough to, see it over the line and get first place. Whereas for me, you can just drop a power 2 minion on a base, and if that happens to come second, maybe in a 2-player game or even in a 3-player game, that and it succeeds, that clever distraction will come off because it's play after the base scores. So you can then cash in on very, very limited effort and very, very limited resources to do what is quite a significant VP swing. So even on a 3-2-1 base, it becomes a 2-2-2 base for 1 minion and 1 card. And that is a big swing. And maybe they played Rude Awakening, rush to the base to its finish. You've managed to have 1 minion on there or something like that, and it was a 3-2-1, and you've suddenly then gone to a 2-3-1 base. So I think for me, it's the value of clever distraction. It's so easy to be coming second or third on a base, whereas I think it's just a bit harder to make everything align up in your hand for a big Rude Awakening drop. And as you say, there are probably times where you do want to play so you are doing it just to break a base, because some of the on-play abilities from minions can be quite good. And that's actually one final point there, actually, is that it's not optional. So let's say you've got 5 minions that you want to drop, and then 1 really good minion you want to hold back. You have to drop all of them. You can't choose to only drop some and not drop others. And I think that maybe is a little bit of a downside that maybe, I don't know if you factor that in or not, but you might have something you just don't want to drop at that moment. And it's got a great on-play ability or something, you just don't want to waste it on a Rude Awakening play. The fact that
it is your action. It is your action. So if there's something you wanted to play, you could play it first and then play your action technically. But yeah,
that just speaks
true.
To
Yeah,
me
sorry. Yeah,
why,
true. That's a good point actually as well.
That just speaks to me of why you play it to finish the game.
Yeah, it's your finisher. It is your finisher, and this is the difficulty I've got with these two cards, because I really like them both. I would happily have both through, and every time I start thinking, no, it's clever distraction, I keep thinking, oh, actually, no, it's Rude Awakening. And both of you have put forward some really quality arguments about it. But for me, I think it's going to come down to really 2 things. Number 1 is the ease of play, and number 2 is the sheer card cost to do it. Rude Awakening is too expensive for you to not win the game. So if you play it and for some reason someone specials you out of that end bit, imagine you get clever distractioned on that last base and that VP that you needed gets taken away from you. You've got no cards in your hand and probably no minions left in your deck to be able to compete for any VP that you need afterwards. And to me, that's why I would go Clever Distraction over Rude Awakening. Not because I don't like the card. I absolutely love the card. I think it's a fantastic closing card. But I've seen you use it. I don't remember 3 times. I've definitely seen you use it once. Where
they weren't necessarily against
to close
you.
the game. I know. Well, at least one of them was. I'd say I definitely remember seeing you close it once, close out a game with Rude Awakening, and there is very little you can do in the way of, unless you've got some specials to be able to try to pull some stuff back. You're basically winning that base. And I know, Mark, you sort of said it's probably only going to be 3 minions, and realistically 3 or 4 minions. If they're power 3 or 4, you're dropping still quite a lot of power without any real question or chance to answer, because it happens so fast. But the simple fact is that you've basically shot your hand. You have literally fired your final shot. If you don't win off that, you're probably not going to win the game, even if you're so close to being able to do so. So the sheer cost involved with having to play Rude Awakening, for me, is what shoots itself down a little bit. Whereas Clever Distraction is so easy to play and so easy to gain the VP. And the simple fact that it takes it off the winner and gives it to you is what makes Clever Distraction worth it, in my opinion. I still don't think it really matters, because none of them are coming close to Eternal Hero, sorry.
Oh, you think? I think you mentioned, imagine if you had a double lunch run base and you had 10 minions in hand and you played Rude Awakening and you drew 20 cards off a Rude Awakening play. That would be insane. That would be unbelievably good.
Then when your Clever Distraction only means that you get 4 and I get 4. I've still got
Yeah.
20 cards of mine.
Yeah, but you're looking at that through a very,
Smash.
very specific, tiny example where that's probably never going to happen. We just said ease of play is what gives it to Clever Distraction for me.
It is very easy just to have 1 million on a base, lose the base, and then
2
do a
cards
big
for a
VP
VP.
swing. Yeah.
And the best case scenario, like you said before, a ninja base or a 3-2-1, where that sort of thing is actually very beneficial.
Imagine Winter Squashed, which is a 2-4-1, and you come second, they come first. It becomes a 1-5-1 base. That would be insane. Not that they play on there, but I mean that would just be a crazy victory. So you're giving it to Clever Distraction, Lee?
I am giving it to Clever Distraction. But there's a small part of me that kind of wants to put Rude Awakening through. But to me, it doesn't really matter which one of them goes through because I just don't think either of them compete with Eternal Hero.
That's really interesting because I'm really struggling to see which one is better out of these two. I just don't have any way of distinguishing between the two at the minute. They're both exceptional cards.
Wins for me. Recursion wins for me. And this is the best recursion in the game.
It's very easily... well, I say it's very easy. It can be easily destroyed, though. You could play your Eternal Hero down. Someone just plays a Disenchant, and that's it. It's gone. And there's your big value play has disappeared. But whereas Clever Distraction, you can't. There's a very, very small number of ways of stopping Clever Distraction from being played, but it's almost uncounterable. Whereas Eternal Hero is a proactive. It's great, incredible value. I've never seen a card as good a value as Eternal Hero. But because you have to play it into the game, if you're playing a 4-player game, there's a decent chance that one of those other players has an out to Eternal Hero. And it's one of those cards that if you have the out to Eternal Hero, even if it doesn't benefit you in any way whatsoever,
you play it.
For the good of the game, you should play your card to get rid of Eternal Hero so that everyone else can benefit from it.
The thing is, though, the thing that I kind of keep coming around to in my head is, what would I prefer? Would I prefer an Invader or Clever Distraction?
See, I think Clever Distraction is one of those cards. Realistically, I think either of these cards could they could realistically be Invader or any other card in the the championship. Either of these cards could do well in Champions, and that's where I'm really struggling because I love Invader. The Invader is in my wheelhouse, and to have a card that is Invader and it's a Viking Invader basically where you can steal the VP, it's even better. So I'm really struggling with this. And then Eternal Hero, keep your best card and another, and the action in play indefinitely is also unbelievable. So I'm we've had a couple of really close finals, and this is certainly another one for me that's, borderline 50-50. Luke, you haven't said anything on this yet?
I know my answer.
Is your answer the same as Lee's answer?
Would you like to decide which way you're going to lean first, and then I'll reveal my
Luke wants the power.
I mean, I genuinely just don't know. Maybe if I was to give it to like 50.01 to 49.99, it might be slightly more to Clever Distraction, just because of the vulnerability of Eternal Hero. And I think in a 2-player game, maybe if you go second, you pick Warriors because you know that the other player doesn't have a action destruction card, and you know that Eternal Hero is going to come good. But in a 4-player game, it might be a risky pick. Even in a 3-player game, it might be a risky pick, or it might be a card that's so strong that other players have to target it. And
you still need to have the right card in your hand at the right time to be able to destroy Eternal Hero. And the way that I could see Eternal Hero being used is when you're literally playing power to win the base. You want to keep your best power around, maybe with Orcs or something where you've got a lot of power 5s. You just want to keep piling your Eternal Hero on your power 5 so that you keep getting the maximum amount of power drop per turn or what have you, and sort of for it. So you're continuously getting those things back. I think you get more, to me, I think you get more VP out of Eternal Hero than you do out of Clever Distraction. That's kind of why I've put it that way around.
Well, one of the best, just thinking for pairings when you can play again, one of the best sort of engine faction faction engine king minions in the game is Cyberback for Cyborg Apes, and Cyberback can play on minion actions from the discard pile directly onto Cyberback. So even if it gets discarded, you just play Eternal Hero back onto Cyberback. So that could be an unbelievable pairing as well. Like an Eternal Cyberback basically that can just continually keep on playing. You can't do anything about Eternal Hero in that instance. But as I say, for me, it's ever so slightly marginal, probably Clever Distraction. So go on, Luke, you've got the decider then.
Finish us off.
Actually, sorry, Luke.
Eternal Hero. Too late.
I was going to say, just before you finish, do you want to just go to the next meeting because you've only got like a minute?
No, need it.
Eternal Hero wins.
Well, we'll need it to wrap. We'll wrap up.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Mark's lost 2 in a row. Screw you, Mark.
I mean, I'm not. As I say, I think Eternal Hero is an amazing card, and it's a card that I don't think I've ever seen before. And that could just be because it's in Warriors.
You have to play with monsters. You have to play with monsters. That's the problem. Both of these, you need to play with treasures and monsters, or the sets just don't work. That's the downside of both these cards, but it's worth doing. It's fun. Munchkin, treasures, monsters, all fun.
Right, should we quickly go to the next meeting just to wrap up?
No, bye everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Right, Lee, you were just saying about Clever Distraction as the winner.
No, he won't.
No.
Yeah.
He's trying to distract us. He's trying to distract us with a team meeting
and meeting for all.
And not clever enough.
No, I think it's a worthy winner, Eternal Hero. It's a very, very good card, especially if you swerve the action destruction. Unbelievable value over time. And it's going to put, it's going to cause some real issues for some of the other minions and actions that we've got in the Champions already. It'll be interesting to see who this gets paired up against in the first round. If it's paired up against Valkyrie, it's pretty much the only thing that can beat Valkyrie. So, there we go. We've had it. Okay. So, any final concluding thoughts on Munchkin?
It's really good. You should buy it.
Yeah. Please buy it.
Cards as Clever Distraction and Eternal Hero, which are clearly 2 of the best cards in the game.
2 of the best cards, but the factions are strong. There's a minimum of 4 good factions, and possibly
there are 4 different factions cards up on the board right now in the last, as in the 4 seeds that we've just been talking about there, and all 4 of them are arguably better than some of the cards that have won. And the fact that there are 4 of them there willingly in a faction full of other interesting cards, I think is creed enough to be able to spend money on this particular expansion set. I really like that it is essentially just the starter set, but with some different ideas, and I really, really like the fact that it's fun.
I was going to ask you about that. If someone were to start the game now, would you say for them to get the core set? Would you say get Marvel, or would you get Munchkin?
I'm limited on my knowledge of Marvel, so I couldn't necessarily advise for that. My fave would still be to start with the original core set, because I think that's the base game mechanics. This is probably it adds a little bit more into things, and it's like trying to start with madness. It's just an extra thing that you would start to learn, and it would kind of detract from the rest of the experience almost. You're guaranteeing in your core set that you learn, well, you're getting some amazing factions anyway, dinosaurs number 1, but you're able to play the core set and make and match, smash up any of those factions with any of the other factions, and it wouldn't be any different. Whereas this one, probably a little bit more experience required, maybe a younger audience even, I don't know, but just this is for fun. It's such a fun expansion, and like Luke said earlier on, there's at least 4 sets where you don't need to look at treasures or monsters, 4 factions at least where you don't need to look at monsters or treasures within playing this game, of which, like clerics, which are a brilliant little faction to player 1.
Do the factions that don't involve monsters and treasures, do their bases have monsters on them?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry.
Like, do the halfling bases have monsters? All right.
I don't think so. The factions that contain monsters and treasures, like warriors, I think have that mechanic within their bases, but I think I don't think, and don't correct me,
Dwarves are another one.
I don't think the other ones do. I think halflings are just about the minion chaining and that mechanic. I think they stick to their mechanic. So the thieves ones have treasures, and you know, I think they stick to that. So I think you can get away with it. But I've just sent you a link to it. It's £16.
£16.
£16
What, on Zatu?
No, somewhere else.
All right.
I didn't look on Zatu actually, but it's probably just as cheap on there. Shout out to Zatu.
If anyone down in the comments wants a copy of Munchkin, then Luke's giving out links to get it cheap.
I just googled it, but yeah, it's worth getting. Interestingly, we were into Smash Up. Then I bought this set for completion's sake. Then we played this set, and then I bought Munchkin afterwards, the actual game of Munchkin, and we like Munchkin a lot. So it was very much worth doing. If you've ever had any interaction with either of these, they're both worth buying.
It wasn't too expensive either, was it? And it became a real regular Thursday night sort of pull out was Munchkin for a good number of Thursdays.
There's just a board and then the rest of the cards, and there's they've absolutely gone to town on all the different cards you can get.
There's a lot of expansions for Munchkin. You see it on every game shop.
Yeah.
Do you prefer Marvel or Munchkin, Luke?
I think that's tough. It's tough because I think they made a lot of strong mechanics, and they've put some new mechanics in and some very strong factions. I think you're getting 8 variable good sets, whereas in this you don't want to play monsters and treasures all the time, but the ones that don't have that are still worth getting. So for me, I see this like a 5 faction expansion. It's as good as that rather than an 8 factions expansion, because you're basically getting 4 or 5 factions that you can play in your smashes rather than as its own base game. So I kind of see them separately. I see the Marvel and the base game as 8 faction sets, whereas this I see as 5 with 3 bonus. I don't love Monsters and Treasures. We've been over that, haven't we? But I don't love Monsters and Treasures and changing the bases. I don't like anything that messes with what pieces you play in extra cards and madness and all that.
If you can get this set for less than £20, buy both.
Yeah, because Marvel's about 25, something like that, in the 25 to 30 range. It's pretty good for a core set, 8 faction set. Hello?
Titmouse.
What happened then? The thing just sort of ended, and are you guys both there? I can
hear you. I can't see you.
I can't see you at all.
You sound vexy. Let
me I have no idea.
There's a niche reference that you won't understand.
Yeah, you got me though.
I got it.
Yeah. Let's stop video and see what happens. Oh, I can see you again now.
Oh.
Can you see me?
I can see you now.
Yes.
That was so strange.
Can you hear me now?
Get back, you bastards. I'll break your leg.
All right, shall we wrap?
I don't know if that transfers to our American audience.
Shall we wrap up this one then?
Yeah. So conclusion: Eternal Hero wins. Mark's going to go away and buy Munchkin straight away, and so should everybody else. And everyone else should also buy the main Munchkin set.
That game.
Done.
We're gonna have to put a sponsorship thing under this video now to say that you've been sponsored by the guy who made Munchkin. Getting some
everybody else.
And if you want to film other people drawing against the plutonium dragon and the reactions that they get when they realize that they're going to die and lose all of their stuff and progress, make sure you put that in the comment section, because that is a good, fun experience to watch. Not be part of, but to watch. It's really funny.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think we've got a worthy winner in Eternal Hero, and we're going to be releasing the final 3 videos in this series fairly soon after each other, because we're keen to sort of wrap it up now and move on to the Champion of Champions and do the draw and things like that. So after this one, you'll shortly see Culture Shock, and then after that, you'll see Arsenal 9000, which we definitely haven't already recorded back in December. And and have to do it again. So, but yeah, other than that, we'll see you very soon.
Goodbye.
Thanks for stopping by.